Hey,
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world, when you watch this, and where you watch this. My name is Mike Karaklis, and you have tuned in to Corporate Life is Hell. The premise behind our show is that anybody who's spent enough time working inside of the corporate world has discovered somewhere along the line that it can be hell. And it's also the premise of our show that the reason for it is failures in leadership. And while it's easy to point the finger at other leaders and find poor leadership all around you, there's only one leader that you can control and make a real difference with, and that's yourself. So the idea here is, corporate life is sometimes hell, but your experience of it is entirely within your control. And when you step up and take responsibility to be a leader, you can change that dynamic for yourself. So this is, despite the snarky title, a leadership discussion. I'm joined by a couple of great guys, Carl and Billy Bob. One of you jump in and introduce yourself.
hi, I'm Carl Deershaw. I am in Northern Colorado and spent an eternity in corporate life, enjoyed parts of it and didn't enjoy other parts of it, but now I'm out on my own doing business coaching. And I'm sitting here looking at 8 inches of snow out the window. Probably not the same thing that you've got down in Texas, guys, but this is being Colorado. The sun is out and it's glorious, and the snow is melting off the streets, and it's fantastic.
I love that weather.
Absolutely.
I love seeing it through Blab. I love watching it. I love trusting that I can access the pictures. I'm Billy Bob Brigman. I'm the founder of Empathy, and we design and execute high-impact employee feedback campaigns. So we help large organizations convert employee feedback to business impact. And I'm also here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, as is Mike.
Cool. Thanks, Billy Bob. I failed really to introduce myself as well. My business, I was a corporate guy for 20 years. That's partly where this experience of corporate life is hell comes from. I worked in human resources, leadership development, training and development. And when I finally figured out that I wanted to make a broader difference than just one company, so I started my own business. I went out on my own about 4 years ago and became an executive and leadership coach. And so today I primarily coach individual executives, but I also do team coaching and team facilitation, creating leadership team offsites. And, I'm really interested in the work that Billy Bob does with your company, Empathy, because in my corporate world, one of the things I was responsible for off and on was employee feedback and gathering employee feedback and connecting with employees. And at one point in my career, responsible for shaping the culture of a very large dispersed company. So I think at the heart of all of that is this idea of trust, which is the topic that we put on the table today. We had a new person join, Saket. We'd love to hear from you and maybe correct me on how I pronounce your name, Saket. There is maybe helping me out there, Saaket. Great to have you, Saket. So I'm going to pose this question to you guys first. What do you think it would be like? There's some assumptions embedded in this question, but what do you think it would be like if management and employees trusted one another?
Well, everything would be glorious and problem-free, right? Isn't that the answer you're searching for, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the fact is that, so let's look at family dynamics. The fact is that people know each other very well and they love them, and that's fine and everything. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's conflict-free, because people have different points of view and different things they're trying to achieve and, stuff like that. So the idea that we would all somehow magically be friends and, live in an ideal world, that's a bit overblown. And when I've tried to create that kind of environment, I found out that actually people are more complicated than you give them credit for. And it's not possible, I don't think, to create a perfect employment situation. But that's it. I mean, we can obviously make huge strides. And the fact is that there's a lot of dysfunction that is based upon lack of trust.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that last point about the dysfunction based on lack of trust. I know when I imagine a relationship that is based on trust, even a management and employee relationship, I don't necessarily imagine that it's always nice and we're friends with each other. I actually think that's one of the things that might belie a lack of trust. You know, if you and I or two people don't trust each other, they might actually have a very cordial relationship on the surface because they don't have the strength and the trust and the ability to actually go deeper and to risk upsetting each other or saying something that their partner would disagree with. So, you know, I imagine if trust existed between employees and management, that there'd be a lot more truth telling, that there might actually be some conflict, but there would probably be the ability to work through conflict constructively rather than what you see most of the time in corporate hell, which is, you know, employees don't trust a thing management is telling them, and management treats employees like children and doesn't trust them, you know, with information or with, you know, any number of things.
Yeah, I mean, some of the best philosophies I've seen are simply based on treat your employees like adults who have the right to make their own decision and who have a little bit of common sense. Because you're right, I see that a lot where we treat them like children or mechanical objects. So I did want to point out, Saket asked this great point here about you should make a good relationship with your employee before your customers. And I wanted to riff off of that for a second because there's a growing conversation about this. Should I be customer first or employee first? And there's actually interesting logic that either of them would make sense. So if you have your employees first, then that means that work through your employees to treat the customers right. And if you mistreat your employees, then they're never going to treat customers right. So that logic does hold. The counter logic to that is if you put customers first, then that gives us a reason to rally the troops to say we're all about serving customers, we're about making a difference in the world, you know, whatever the big mission and vision and that kind of stuff is. And so it's externally driven, and then it's a way to bring in the right employees that get enthused about that and to rally the troops behind a common cause, and it gives people a reason to pull together. So, you know, it's interesting that there's conversation going around that either one is perfectly fine. It depends on your logic and how you use it. And actually, obviously, the best is to do both.
Yeah, you have to balance. I think the problem usually is that companies over-rotate to one or the other. Billy Bob, what do you think of all this?
Yeah, I think that word trust is kind of loaded. And so I think a lot of the trust issues aren't because employees or management aren't trustworthy. I think a lot of it stems from the fact that there's not enough shared context. And so because we're operating with a totally different context, we assign intent to the other side that probably, if the reality is if we had the same context they had, we might arrive at similar decisions. And so I think that's why I think a lot of the work, Mike and Carl, that you guys do with your customers is so important, is to try to create this environment where we can share more context, which helps, it puts you in a position to have more empathy for the other side.
So is shared context the same as transparency, or is it something different?
No, that's not the way I think of it. To me, it's almost more of a understanding the constraints of the other side, right? And so for kind of a stereotypical cliche example is sales and marketing. So always in so many companies you have, or even engineering and marketing, where you have sales saying marketing doesn't bring us anything. You have, can't hear me.
I
Well,
can
we
hear
can
you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And marketing, sales will think marketing doesn't understand what we do. They don't give us good plans. They don't give us good leads. The guys in marketing think, okay, we keep giving sales leads and they keep falling through the cracks. But no one has this shared context of kind of understanding the challenges and the constraints that the other side's working on. And I think when you get those teams talking and they can start to work together with kind of this shared context and really understand both the opportunity and the constraints and put that all on the same table, they often can find common ground and build trust pretty quickly.
You said the magic words, get them talking to each other. I think it's amazing to me how few people know how to really talk to each other nowadays. I know that's a little bit of an extreme statement to make, I know. But having gone through my own journey of transformation as I've become a coach and started getting into more and more, deep conversations with clients, I realize how rare it is to have real, deep, meaningful conversations. And it's certainly not something that happens, between management and employees, as a group. As if you can kind of collectively think about them that way, there's so much hedging and so much thinking about how I want to be perceived by the other partner and how I need to control the other partner, the other party. At least in the case of management to employees, I think that's a big part of it, how to control them. That there's just simply not open dialogue, real open dialogue.
Okay, so the challenge that I throw out here is when we use language like get the groups together and have them talk, and that's great, but basically I'm absolving myself of responsibility to make it happen. I'm saying the guys upstairs need to bring the groups together and we need to have more interaction. And so what I would like to pull it back to is what can I do at the individual level? And, for me, this has been really clear because, essentially I'm a one-person business. And so if I don't do it, nothing happens. And so it's my job to go out there and have conversations with potential partners, with potential clients, with other people who might be in my sphere of influence. I have to make that happen. I think the same is true in the corporate environment, that if you mistrust what's going on over there in sales, take it upon yourself to actually go make some friends over there in sales. Talk to these people, find out why they think the way they do. And guess what? You find shocking things like they're not the same as you. They don't have the same job. They don't have the same background,
True. You come to understand them a little bit better. And along that same vein, you actually discover how similar we are. Like we're both human beings in this organization with concerns, with our own concerns. And you start actually seeing each other as a real live human being, which is what we have in common versus an object, which, you brought that up earlier, Carl, how we tend to objectify the other side. And that's when trust gets lost.
Yeah, we make them into cartoons, right? Mm-hmm. And I say, well, salespeople always think this way, and they're weird, and they don't understand me, and they don't care about me, and it goes downhill from there. So that's why I'm much more of the mind of if there's somebody that you would like to trust more, or you would like to have them trust you more, either way, then go out there and start having conversations. And like real conversations, not sending stuff back and forth on text messaging on Facebook or something, but like, go have coffee. Sit down for half an hour.
Talk, communicate.
Yeah, what an idea, huh?
Yeah. I think so this question of if I am an employee, everybody in the company is an employee, even the CEO, but if I sort of see myself as one of the masses and not part of management, what are the things I can do to build trust and create trust in this relationship? And I've got a couple of ideas about that. One, the first thing is I have to, what am I trying to say? I have to initiate it. I have to create some trust in myself. So that starts first by not taking what they're doing personally. So when management makes decisions that I don't agree with, not jumping to what a shitty decision, what a crummy decision that was that management made, and start to really, start putting blame out there without really understanding. I think Billy Bob might have alluded to this earlier or mentioned this. There's a perspective there. They've got, they're in a different set of circumstances than I am. They see the world from a different perspective. And so they're maybe not going to make the same decisions I would make. Just the act of understanding that, it doesn't mean I have to agree with the decision. It doesn't mean I have to say it was right. It just means I have to not take it so personally. That opens me up now to being more trusting of who they are. And it lets me listen and lets me actually engage in a conversation instead of keeping them at a distance as part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know for me, what always helped a ton is if I just assume good intent on the other side. So if I just decide from the beginning, I don't know whether I know you well or whether I have evidence to think otherwise, I think you do a lot more damage to yourself by trying to protect against the very few people that actually have bad intent versus the opportunities, the gains from just assuming in every interaction, I'm going to assume you have good intent. And there may be systemic factors that pit us against each other. There may be metrics that the corporate leaders put in place that make it to where we're sort of necessarily put at odds. But I'm still going to assume in our interactions that you have good intent. If we assume that allows us to kind of go a layer deeper and explore, okay, what are those systemic factors that are feeding this mistrust or potential for mistrust?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the ways I stated that is that we're sort of all equally screwed up as human beings. Mm-hmm. And so we're all just doing the best we can with what we know at the time. And so therefore, each of us will make mistakes and things like that. But honestly, trust more comes from saying they really were doing the best they can given their situation, their environment. So maybe I would learn something if I went over and found out why they thought the way they did about it. Tell me the story behind that. Tell me how you arrived at that. And that's very helpful.
Drop the judgment of each other and open up to understanding the other.
Hey, so I got a cool story, Mike, because I like Carl, maybe you were the one that posed, what as an individual can we do? Instead of waiting for the perfect conditions, which will never be there, what can we as an individual do? And so one of my customers, a huge pharmaceutical company, and, they had the same sort of dynamic of struggle between, marketing and field reps. And there's just in every pharmaceutical company that I've ever worked with, they both think the other side doesn't know what they're doing, right? And so so rather than waiting for some big corporate initiative, one of the sales reps started a blog, completely took the own initiative, posted it on the intranet, just day in the life of a sales rep, and just started putting little daily experiences out, sitting in doctor's office. And it not only became super popular among her peers in the sales organization who could identify and maybe learn from those things, but the people that the marketing and support staff at corporate, it was, hey, this is our window. We have research and we have data, but we don't hear enough of just the anecdotal stories about what is it like to be a day in the life. And that was something that the person didn't wait for. They just decided, hey, I'm going to go and almost treat this like a public journal. And it became a huge, I would say communication improvement tool in the organization, and also created a lot of opportunity for that rep, because they didn't sit around and wait for somebody to give them permission.
Well, and how incredibly cool is that? I mean, that's an amazing idea. And I would assume the way you're talking about it, it wasn't trying to position as here's how smart I am and how I have it all figured out, but it was focused a lot more on honesty and maybe a little bit of vulnerability. I can't imagine how much courage it took.
To be honest, the way I understood it, it was almost like, hey, there's all these stories that are just almost entertaining that happen as we're out going, among these doctors' offices. So it started off almost being like more of a funny stories from the sales trail type thing. Mm-hmm. But quickly, I think the internal communications team definitely saw, okay, this sales rep that just took initiative is getting more eyeballs and attention to their post on our intranet than anything that our team is professionally producing.
Mm-hmm. So you bring up a hot button for me, which is internal corporate communications. That doesn't surprise me at all. That somebody out there speaking the truth gets a whole lot more traction than the internal corporate communications function. Who at its worst is trying to is spinning and sanitizing everything and putting out messages that are intended to, I don't know, intended to not really speak the truth, but to try to plant a certain idea or put the company in the best light, with their intent is in the right place. Well, we want to keep employees motivated, so let's pretend everything is great. Let's describe everything in the following way. And I used to get, I had a job where I was responsible for corporate communications for the whole company, and I've been involved with writing lots of communications. And it's one of those things that started to really wear on me over time about how we would communicate via written communications. And it would get, everybody would have to weigh in on it, and we'd have to get the words just right. And we'd end up creating something that people would just see as like pablum, right? Or blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean anything. I don't even read it because it's just corporate speak now. So that's where you got a whole lot of words you're throwing at people, but you're not really communicating anything other than I don't trust you to hear the raw truth from me.
Right. Well, and so, Billy Bob, that says a lot about the corporate culture to be able to support and allow that kind of thing, because I do know that there's some companies where that could be a dangerous career move, right?
Right.
But, honestly, I think the fear of doing something courageous like that is a lot more than the reality. Many experiences I've had is that if you are honest and you listen to the feedback and you talk with your bosses and stuff like that, there's a lot more latitude for taking action than people give credit for. I think a lot of people just stuck up in fear of, oh my God, my boss is going to hate this, so I won't even propose.
Right. Well, I think if you're 25, 26 years old, your career path has a lot higher probability that you're going to be able to invent roles that maybe 30 years ago the corporate hierarchy was fixed, and so you knew, okay, there's a certain, I know that those jobs at the next level and the second level and the third level, they don't change that often, and you sort of know what it takes, or you think you know what it takes to, and how long it's going to take to navigate that. And I think more and more what I hear now are people saying, hey, this is something that's really interesting to me. I think I can add value. I'm going to go take initiative, and then I'm going to go pitch to a senior executive creating this role that doesn't exist right now. And I think every year there's more and more of those kinds of roles where the company actually is saying, go do it. Yes, you're now the VP of Liberate Leaders. That position did not exist last year, and you've sold us on the idea that it should.
Yeah, that's where the power lies for an organization to really encourage people to be innovative and come out of their shell is to trust them to do things like this. That the mistake a lot of companies make is, well, we can't see how that new role fits within our existing structure, so no, we're not going to do that. It's how open are you as a management function to new ideas and letting people run with things that you can't necessarily control. That makes a huge difference in the environment of the organization. Yeah.
So one of the things you were talking about, Billy, Bob, was going and proposing a job role, and I've done that several times and even did it successfully. But there's even more space for just going out and taking initiative in addition to your day job or in connection with your day job. It's like this lady who did the blog. That wasn't a job. She was doing her job and then decided to add value to the organization by putting this thing in there and got some positive feedback and did it. So to me, that's where the more creative space is, because when you want to go and create a job, it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of things you need to sort through because you got to understand how managers think, and there's risks and all this stuff. And so it's something that you may be able to do a few times in your career if you're lucky. But there's a lot more latitude to just add value to the organization, add value to the job by taking some initiative.
And I totally agree. And that would be my coaching to anyone if they were going to go pitch an idea. To your point, Carl, just start doing it, right?
Yeah.
Prove it.
Yeah.
And then, but before you ever even go ask, so this sales rep analogy, if that rep wanted to pitch some new role, okay, it's a whole different ball game if they're going to pitch that after they've attracted this huge following internally, and there's all kind of, at all tiers of the organization, people are learning from these things that they're posting. That's the time to go do it. Go pitch it after you've already established the value as a volunteer.
Yeah, I started my career at the late great Sun Microsystems, and in the early days, we used to always say it is much better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Yeah, but that is a unique culture, Mike. Let's admit it. And I had some similar experience at HP. But I do empathize with people who feel a little bit more restricted of needing to get approval and stuff like that. So, let's take this example of this lady wants to start a blog. She has this great idea, thinks that it might be fun and add value. Okay, great. Now she's got to think through it and think, how does that actually add value to the organization? Because if it looks like a total waste of time, then I'm not going to be received well for that. My boss will give me some flack for it. So first, I've got to do something which is actually constructive. Then, depending on the organization environment, I think maybe I'll talk to my boss first before I start this and say, okay, so boss, I had this idea. Or one thing I've used in the past is say, hey, boss, I am going to do this, and here's why. And I just wanted your feedback. I'm not necessarily asking for permission. I don't use that kind of verbiage. It's just like, do you have any ideas for how I might improve it? And that helps to inform the boss, get it on board. If your boss has some alarm bells that need to be pulled at this point before you've done any damage, they can say, oh, okay, well, watch out for this, could get you in trouble, or, approach it this way, or, just give it a try. That's what most bosses would say, actually, is if it's a good idea, just give it a try, see what happens, try it for a few weeks, if it doesn't go anywhere, that's fine, no damage done. And, but I do empathize with people who want to sort of get their boss on board, and I think that's a good thing, because then they can run interference for you if it creates some larger concerns.
I think the thing people need to understand is the impact of their actions. And a lot of the time, the impact of my actions there's going to be an impact on my boss. If I create ripples in the organization in some way, my boss is going to, and my boss's boss becomes aware of those ripples, then my boss is squarely in the middle of that. And so I need to understand, what does that impact on my boss look like? Is it putting him in or her in a bad light? Is it making his or her life difficult? And so I got to take responsibility for that impact. And that responsibility might look like, going to them first and explaining, here's what I want to do, or, any number of things. But it's that responsibility for impact that goes along with giving yourself full permission to actually take the action.
Yeah, giving yourself permission, Mike. One of the real eye openers for me was once I decided I was going to start my own business. Well, I had about a 6-month window where I was an employee. Okay, so I know I'm going to launch this new thing, but today I work at company X. But what happened was and I also expected, once I make that leap, I'm never ever going back. So I basically, all fear of what might this do to my career was gone. And so for approximately 6 months, I operated where, okay, let me assume that I don't need to worry about whether somebody's going to, whether I'm going to get forgiveness or permission.
I bet you were more effective than you've ever been.
Well, the thing that was amazing, because it definitely was not about being disrespectful or not taking care of what I was, my commitments were, but I would get requests maybe from a VP 2 levels above me that would say, hey, we're doing this standing meeting. I need you to do this activity that I knew was not added zero value, does not work, but it was just something that had been done for years. And it'd say, hey, I need you to do that. I need you to do it. We're going to be on this call in an hour. And I'd say, yeah, I can't do that. And it was kind of like, well, what do you mean? what do you mean that? Like, I was like, he's like, do you have to be somewhere else? I'm like, no, I just that doesn't add any value, and I don't think it works, and it's just not a good use of my time. And it was kind of like, it was just dumbfounded, like, hey, that's not really an option. And then the next thing that happened wasn't, hey, you're fired. It was, okay, well, I'll do that for you. It's like, I'll take that off your plate and I'll put it on mine. And it was one thing after another where I just said, hey, if I just free myself from the corporate fear and just all these like time wasting corporate things that we do just to kind of feed the bureaucracy, I was much more effective. And there weren't compliance penalties. It was actually like, okay, that's a good point. Let's keep going.
And maybe have a discussion about valuable use of time in general.
Right.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah, a lot of junk we do that's a waste of time.
Right. It puts your attention in the right place on whether or not this was value add, instead of your attention being on, what's this person going to think of me? What's the punitive action going to be? In corporate life, we spend so much time worrying about not upsetting our superiors or making the right impression over here that we lose sight of the real reason we're doing most of the work, which is to serve the customer or to create value in some way or, do something meaningful. All that stuff gets put second to the corporate politics of how I'm going to be perceived, what's going to be the consequences and all that.
Yeah, and I think the other piece that I think ties back to the last conversation we're having about taking initiative is I sort of looked at, I think everybody that works in a big corporation, you have this pie chart of your tasks that take your time. And there's some percentage of that pie chart that are things that you really do not enjoy. So even if you would say, I absolutely love my job, it's very meaningful work, there's still some portion of that pie that's just things you really dislike. And there's some small portion of the pie that this is the work that really energizes me. And so I think, that for the person that's in that corporate job now, even if it's a job that they don't like, there's some portion of that pie chart that is energizing to them, even if it's 1%. And I think these opportunities to take initiative are all about how can I go increase that 1% to 5% and 10%, even if I need to do it out of work hours. And that's what fed actually this person that started the Sales Rep Day in the Life journal was, hey, I like writing. I kind of get that energizes me. And so they took initiative to just, not because necessarily they thought it would add value to the business. It was just a way for them to have more of the work that energizes them, incorporated into their job.
I think that's a really quick answer to the question. Imagine if management and employees trusted one another, you'd have a huge amount of energy freed up. Yeah. You know how much energy goes into managing distrust? If they trusted each other, all that energy gets repurposed to, hey, what can I do that's important, that has meaning, that would add value right now?
Yeah, I see that an awful lot. And, the fact is that we at the individual level, we have problems with trusting our boss and our peers and those people on the org chart that we've never met. And, all of that kind of stuff. It really is difficult. And part of the answer is to go out there and have real conversations with these people, exhibit a level of trust, even if you're not totally self-confident in it, that I trust that you're doing a good job, doing the best you can in your situation. I don't understand your situation. That's the problem. So let's talk about your situation, and I'll share with you my situation. Those are productive conversations, and then that builds trust.
Yep. Well, we're sort of out of time, or we're at the time that we usually decide to end it. But let's do this. What kind of closing thoughts do you have on this idea of trust, and what it would be like if management and employees trusted each other? Closing thoughts.
Well, my closing thought is always just everybody is doing the best they can given their situation and what they know. So assume that they're intelligent and doing the best they can and build up from there.
Yeah. I like that one a lot. Assume the best from other people always. Always go into it that way and drop the other assumptions. Creates trust.
Yeah.
Yep, I would agree with Carl. I think kind of the next step from that is just, if you assume we both have good intent, then let's together go try to discover what are the systemic factors that are causing us to have a different context.
That's a good plug for the work that you do, isn't it?
That's right.
Billy Bob?
That's right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, the number one person you don't understand very well is your boss.
Oh.
So go have coffee with your boss and have a real conversations. Put all that crap to the side about the job and everything like that, and have a real conversation.
If I had a nickel for every time I'm having a conversation with a client, a coaching session, and we get to the point where we realize, sure seems like you need to have a real conversation with your boss, doesn't it? Like, yeah. It's amazing how little real communication happens. There's lots of direction, lots of sending of emails, lots of words sent to each other's way, very little communication.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you, Mike, you guys, because you've been in charge of thousands of employees before, you had this intuition already, and experience. But this year, for me, seeing tens of thousands of employee surveys, I was completely surprised by how often the feedback from employees is, I don't have any dialogue, like no contact with my manager, zero. Like they're just somebody that sends me email. That was kind of shocking to me, like how common that is.
It's very common.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so, if you want to make your job better, if you want to enjoy your job more and have more influence and get stuff done, then go have that conversation with your boss, multiple conversations, not just one.
Yeah. Hey, I want to throw a thank you out there for Socket. Socket, you've been giving us a lot of comments over on the side, and we appreciated having you with us today.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. And it was great to have a number of other people join us, like Charlene and Radio Free Bob and Janelle.
Did Charlene join us? I know she subscribed.
She subscribed. I don't know if she showed up.
Yeah, well, Radio Free Bob, great to see you. We had Janelle, thanks for joining. Good group today. All right, I guess unless there's anything else to talk about, I'm going to close it off. I got a blab question. What's the G and the H mean up by our pictures?
Guest and host.
Oh, guest and host. Thank you.
So what
Okay.
you'll want to do, what you'll want to do is like make Carl a co-host, because
Yeah, we did that before.
yeah, that way if something weird happened on your side, Mike, the show would go on.
Yeah.
And also what that allows you to do is one person can just, like the co-host can manage letting people in and out in the chat room without, you don't have to do those 4 different things all at once. So I've seen a lot of people, they basically have a co-host who just manages Blab, all the buttons of Blab.
I forgot to do that.
So, Mike, I'd like to put in a plug for our next show.
Yes, absolutely.
So I hope everybody has a wonderful holidays and everything like that. Our next show is scheduled for what, January 6th, right? Isn't that the Wednesday?
I think that sounds right. First Wednesday in January.
Yep, and we're scheduled to bring on Chris Hutchinson, who's a guy that I know here personally in Northern Colorado. He just published this book called Ripple. I'm seeing it backwards. Are you seeing it backwards?
No.
Oh, okay, good. But he's a really, really smart guy, has done a lot of work on organizational dynamics, and he really understands the power of the individual to make a real difference. So please put that on your calendar, 12 o'clock Eastern Time, U.S., on Wednesday the 6th, and we'll have a fantastic discussion with him.
Yeah, he's a great guy too. I had the chance to talk with him a little bit in preparation, and really nice guy, super smart. Came out of, I want to say, the Air Force Academy, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and now does great work with organizations. And I think his book Ripple is all about what we're talking about. One person can make a ripple in the organization. One person can make a ripple in the world, is what I believe.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Have great holidays, everyone.
Bye.